by Dr. Walter Manning at the Boston University. They put the telescope up there, and with that thing, which had a focal length of 2,500 inches, we photographed an Atlas missile raising up out of the fog cover and flying downrange. We got all 3 stages of powered flight, and as the dummy warhead and the package flew on down range, we were all celebrating the fact that we had seen the thing and accomplished the mission. When I got back to the base with the film the next day, I was called into the office of Major Florence J. Mansman, and there were 3 people in gray suits standing in there. There was a 16-millimeter camera and a screen set up. Major Mansman said, "Lieutenant, sit down and watch this." And he turned down the lights, turned on the camera, on the projector, and the film came on. And I recognized it as the film that we'd shot at Big Sur the previous day. Toward the end of the flight, I was looking at Major Mansman saying, "Pretty good stuff, huh, sir?" And suddenly he said, "Just watch this." And as I watched, the warhead, the dummy warhead, the chaff that was put out in front of it as a decoy to deflect the Russian anti-missile tracking radar, everything was flying along, and suddenly, in the same direction this stuff was flying at about 8,000 miles an hour, an object came into the frame, shot a beam of light at the warhead, flew up to the top, shot another beam of light at the warhead, flew around the direction it was flying, shot another beam of light at the warhead, flew down, shot another beam of light at the warhead, and flew out the same way it came in.
The U.S. government does not obviously appreciate people such as myself and these gentlemen speaking out about this. What we're describing on an ongoing basis, decade after decade, at multiple Air Force bases, is disruption of our nuclear missiles.
We have an email from Kyle in Plainville, Massachusetts. Why would UFOs only disable U.S. defense systems and not another country? Is there a lesson to be learned in all this? Or do you think maybe, Bob Salas, they have disabled other countries?
They have. I know that there have been events in the Soviet Union where they have interfered there. They've been seen in just any country you can name, you know, and they do disable communications, especially.
We have an email from Eric in Atlanta, Georgia. What can be done, if anything, to force the U.S. government and/or military to declassify and release all it knows about UFOs? Dr. Jacobs, when do you think that would happen? Do you think that would happen?
It would take a revolution in public opinion. The problem with this field is that it's surrounded by so many crackpots and weirdos who make a joke about it, that those of us who take it seriously and think that something is definitely going on that needs to be scientifically investigated are laughed at. The technician here in the studio where I am, I said we were talking about UFOs tonight, and her face lit up and she got that kind of look, which is typical of what happens to us. I think that we need a real scientific committee to be put together to look into these things. I think Robert can talk to this too.
Absolutely.
Bob Salas, you agree?
Yeah, I would like to make a comment real quick. The Air Force has perpetrated a fraud, especially in our case. They claim in their statement about UFOs that no UFO incident has ever affected national security, and we lost 20 missiles during the Cold War. They also stonewalled the Condon Committee at that time. The Condon Committee had heard about our incident and were told to go away. They said they were told that no UFOs were involved. And then the Air Force turns around and uses the Condon Committee as a reason not to further investigate UFOs.
Well, let's get to the real core of all of this. What's the biblical view? And we're going to talk a little bit about the days of Noah. You know, Jesus gave 4 disciples a confidential briefing on his second coming. And the 4 disciples came to him to inquire of his return, and he detailed the precedent events that would occur prior to his second coming. And his answer to them, these 4 guys, is so important it's recorded in 3 of the 4 Gospels, Matthew 24 and 25, Mark 13, and Luke 21 and 22. But he opens and closes that briefing with a repeated admonition. Take heed that no man deceive you. And that occurs in Matthew 24:4, and you'll find it's the theme of the entire presentation. We're dealing here in spiritual matters, and the attempt of the enemy will be to deceive us. But in the middle of this briefing, about verse 37 of Matthew 24, Jesus makes a very strange remark. He says, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, in the context there, what he may have been alluding to is simply that it'll be business as usual until, just as it was business as usual until Noah went in the ark, it'll be business as usual until he returns. And most people who read that passage assume that that's all he meant. It's just that it's going to come as a surprise. And yet, there are many scholars from the context of the details of that passage feel he was giving us a hint of something deeper. And we really won't understand what he's talking about unless we understand what the days of Noah were like. And so we're going to try to figure out what did Jesus really mean? As the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. So what you really need to do to get a handle on the UFO thing, strangely enough, is to do your homework in Genesis chapter 6. And I want you to notice the first two verses, and I want you to pay attention that the first two verses are a single sentence. Many people stumble because they don't realize that's a single sentence. I'll just see what I'm getting at in a minute. Genesis 6, verse 1. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the Benai Elohim, the sons of God, as it's translated, saw the daughters of men, that they were fair. And they took them wives of all which they chose. One verse. Now the question is, this strange phrase, sons of God. That can mean anything to us. Let's find out what the text really means. Sons of God. What it is in the Hebrew is, remember, Hebrew goes from right to left. So if you're watching the slides here, remember all languages go towards Jerusalem. Now, sons of God, Benai Elohim, is a term that's always used of a direct creation of God. Adam was a direct creation of God. You and I, in the natural, are not. We're sons of Adam. That's our problem. That's what the book of Romans is all about. And but as many as received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God. The term has technical meaning in the New Testament as well as the Old. In the Old Testament, this term in the Hebrew, in Job 1:6, Job 2:1, Job 38:7, is always used of angels, because they are a direct creation of God. In the New Testament, also, Luke 20:36. Also, the book of Enoch. Now, don't misunderstand my use of this as a citation here. The book of Enoch was very popular from about the 2nd century before Christ to the 2nd century after. It is not an inspired book. I wouldn't treat it that way. But it is useful in understanding the vocabulary and the grammar of the time. And clearly, the book of Enoch, this term is used there also to refer to angels. And it deals with it greatly. The Septuagint, this is the translation of the Hebrew Scriptures that went from Hebrew to Greek. If you were a Jew living in the time of say, the 2nd century before Christ, the enforced language worldwide, the commercial language, was Greek. Thanks to Alexander the Great and following, that was the common language. If you were a Jew in business anywhere in the world, you had to speak Greek to survive. You may have known Hebrew for religious purposes. But Hebrew was to the Jew in those days what Latin is to a Catholic today, basically a language for religious purposes. So one of the things, if you were Jewish in those days, what you would have liked to have had is a copy of what we call the Old Testament, the Tanakh, in Greek, so you could read it. And because of that, under Ptolemy Philadelphus, he funded the translation of the Hebrew Scriptures into Greek. Started about 285 BC, finished about 270 BC, and the result of that work product, he got 70 of the top scholars. The word Septuagint is just 70, a fancy word for a Greek word for 70. He got the 70 top scholars to do the translation. It took about 15 years. And the result of that we have copies of. And it's known as the Septuagint translation of the Old Testament. And it gives us the benefit of the precision of Greek on some of these issues. So it's a very, very powerful resource for scholars. And the Septuagint also makes it clear that we're dealing here with angels, as we think of them. Now in Genesis 6, it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all whom they chose. The word sons of God, of course, is Benai Elohim, sons of God, direct creation, term for angels. Saw the daughters of men. Now, by the way, what that really says in the Hebrew is Banat Adam, daughters of Adam. I mention this because there have been contrived some strange interpretations of this passage that are commonly taught in most seminaries. And it's tragic because there's a view of this passage that has no scriptural support. And we'll talk about that because you'll run into it. Many people think that this is strange stuff, and it is strange. It's even stranger than most people realize. So, now, when you get down to verse 4 of Genesis 6, it says, there were Nephilim in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became the mighty men which were of old, men of renown. What this verse seems to indicate is that these Nephilim were offspring of a strange union. The sons of God, these are angels according to the Hebrew precision here. They came in unto the daughters of men. Daughters of Adam, incidentally. This is not just Cain and Seth and any of that. This is the daughter. These are daughters of men. And they bear children to them. It's those children that are the Nephilim. Now, what on earth is the Nephilim? That word, Nephilim, is a key word. We're going to talk a lot about that. Nephilim means the fallen ones. It comes from the verb nephal, which means to fall, be cast down, to fall away, to desert. That's what a Nephilim is, a deserter, in a sense. What the passage portrays, and it's very difficult for many people to absorb this, it portrays fallen angels. These are not the good guys. Remember when Satan fell, a third of the angels fell with him. Not all of them, but a group of them, apparently, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, chose to try to create a hybrid race. I don't know the technology. I'm not going to get into that. But they apparently were... See, angels can't multiply. Angels are eternal. Reproduction is a process for mortals. But at the same time, Satan's got a problem. A third of the angels fell with him, so he's got a deficiency of 2 to 1 in any war that comes in, right? He's got to find a way to strengthen himself. This is just a conjecture that floats around. Now, the offspring of Nephilim, they're also called the Hagibarim, the mighty ones. And now, where the confusion starts to set in is when this Hebrew passage was translated into the Greek in the Septuagint, the word they used for the Nephilim was gigantes. It sounds like giants. And it turns out they were giants, but that's not what the word means. Gigantes comes from gigas, which means earthborn. So in the Hebrew, they're called the fallen ones. In the Greek, they're called the earthborn. And so let's keep that in mind. The fact that they were giants is like a pun. Yes, they were giants, but that's not what the word means. It carries a different meaning. Let's go on a little further in verse 9 of Genesis 6. It says, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. Terrific verse. We've all read it. But most of us may not pay attention to what that's really saying. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. What does that mean? Well, the word perfect in the Hebrew is tamim. What it means is without blemish, sound, healthful, without spot, unimpaired. What that verse seems to indicate is that Noah's genealogy was unblemished. Now this comes on right after the verses that talk about these strange goings-on, where these fallen angels have created some weird form of hybrid, but Noah was unblemished in his generations, and that's one of the reasons that God chose Noah and his 3 sons and their 4 wives to start over again. The purpose of the flood was not just that there was sin in the land. There was, and that's emphasized. But if sin brings the flood, we better get some life jackets. No, there's something far deeper going on. That's what I want to sensitize you for when you do your own study and come to your own conclusions. But I want you to recognize there's something much more profound that God, as a problem that God was solving, and that is that Satan's strategy was to contaminate the human race. Now, by the way, if this view is correct, I'm presenting to you what's sometimes called the angel view of Genesis 6. That is not taught in most seminaries, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But if that view is correct, as I've suggested from the exegesis of the Hebrew in Genesis 6, it will be confirmed in the New Testament. at least twice, and it is.